Once again, we welcome you to Moving Forward with Young Voices, and we are happy to welcome Ted Newson back to the program. Ted, it's good to see you once again. For those who are meeting you for the very first time, take a moment to tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Good afternoon, Brian. So my name's Ted Newson. I'm a political commentator with the Young Voices Advanced track. I mainly write on civil liberties, be that freedom of speech, academic freedoms, and freedom of the market.
Well, it seems like free speech is a very timely topic. I know I watch some of the different news reports and I see some of the interactions that individuals have, for instance, with law enforcement in the UK over social media posts and so forth. And it looks like free speech is having a bit of a time.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing progressively is a number of non-crimes that are legal but harmful. So the British state is starting to arrest people for burning religious texts or saying things against a certain status quo that they don't like. The freedom to be heretical in Britain is really declining right now. And my article in the Daily Wire is essentially letting Americans know there is an issue with free speech in Britain. They need to be wary. They need to know they need to preserve free speech. And ultimately, people should have the freedom to offend without a target on their back from the state police saying, if you say that, we're going to go after you.
Now, this is not something that just began overnight, though, right? The shrinking limits of how much free speech a person may exercise. How long has that been going on?
So really, ever since the time of Tony Blair in 1997, we've seen crackdowns on speech. It's previously been under the guise of protecting society. There's always in Britain been a kind of implicit socially acceptable, socially unacceptable patterns of speech. But ultimately, the state has co-opted that to make speech that's frowned on illegal, rather than simply frowned upon and socially being socially ostracized should you express speech like that. So really, the state has taken the role of community in policing speech in this country, so much so that you can't speak anymore. You can't even expect people to ostracize you, because before that even happens, the police will be knocking on your door. They'll say, we've seen that you've tweeted something that the state doesn't like, or it contravenes another person's right to not be offended. And so it's the state that steps in and stops people from freedom of speech.
Let's talk about that right to not be offended, because to me that sounds very fraught with danger, in the sense that what offends you may not offend me, or vice versa. Is there an objective measure by which something causes offense, or is it really just in the eye of the beholder?
Well, the issue with this thing called non-crime hate incidents, this is where the police can investigate you for a non-crime, which in itself is absolutely ridiculous. It kind of makes the point that although this isn't criminal, this is against the government view, so we will investigate you for it. And these non-crime hate incidents can still come up on advanced DBS checks. So ultimately, they could stop you from getting a job simply because you've put something on Twitter that the government disagrees with. And the content of this could be absolutely anything that someone gets offended by. You could write something about transgenderism or immigration or any of the main culture issues that are clouding European society and American society. And if one person found it to be offensive, they could report that online post to the police. They could send a screenshot of the post, send it over to the local authorities, and you could expect a knock on your door. In a free country, you don't expect to have the authorities coming up to your house asking you to explain what you've posted on social media simply because one person, not necessarily even in the local community, has got offended over it.
Ted, how steep are the penalties for someone who runs afoul of the speech laws right now in the UK? Is it a stern talking to from the police? Does it include fines? Is there possible jail time for people who may be repeat offenders? How does it work?
Well, it's a process of intimidation. I'll bring up one example which will chime in with you, which is an American citizen who posted something online. I believe it was about immigration. And a few weeks later, she received a knock on the door by the police. For context, this woman is advanced age. She's suffering from cancer and she's in the final years of her life. And instead of being able to live out the final years of her life in peace in her home, she's instead got the local authorities knocking on her door, intimidating her, making her feel like she's committed some kind of thought or speech crime, when ultimately all she's done is expressed a legitimate opinion that most of the UK holds. Wow.
I mean, it sounds very Orwellian when you put it in those terms, and yet I think it's very accurate too, though. What is the lesson that the U.S. should be drawing right now from what is happening in Britain?
Well, historically, the US has been a bastion of free speech. For example, you've got the First Amendment. It wouldn't be the First Amendment if it wasn't the most important thing in American society. So to have that kind of constitutional underpinning of speech, criticizing government, criticizing policy, is absolutely credible. And that's what I'd want to see in Britain. And you really shouldn't take it for granted and start swapping out the First Amendment to offence laws. A few weeks ago, we saw Graham Linehan, who is the producer of a famous UK comedy sketch show called Father Ted. We saw him get off the plane from Arizona, America, in Britain, and he was hounded by 5 armed police officers because he'd made a Twitter post that the government deemed transphobic. Now, the Supreme Court has come in months before this saying that a man and a transgender man are 2 different things, and yet rather than accepting that, the British state has gone after people who seek to repeat this ruling, so much so that the intimidation doesn't just stop with people being involved or knocking on your door. People are actually coming up to you armed now because they think you're that dangerous. And that's the real problem in Britain that America shouldn't slip into.
Yeah, I don't know if you used the exact words thought crime. It seems like you did, but it sounds like that very well describes what is happening. And I agree, and I appreciate the warning that you're offering to those of us here in the States, that we don't get a little too casual or nonchalant with our ability to speak freely. Is there relief in sight for Britons?
Well, I think the fact that it's being talked about as a bad thing is a great progress on the issue. And the Free Speech Union has been absolutely invaluable in stopping crackdowns on academic freedom and freedom of speech. They act as an organization which can help fight people's cases and acts as a voice to the voiceless, where perhaps the state has taken someone down and yet they go after the legal system for you and they sort out what is freedom of speech for you.
All right, we're coming up on, we've got less than a minute to go here, but how hard is it to freely speak your mind right now in Britain? I mean, as long as you are just speaking to friends, you're probably pretty safe, but if you put something online, is that where people have to think twice about who might see it or react to it?
Absolutely. Well, it's the constant fear which is the issue. After the summer 2024, where Lucy Connolly was thrown into jail, we saw tweeting something about immigration could potentially find you thrown into jail. And it ultimately acts as a kind of sword of Damocles hanging over you. Maybe you think you're not allowed to say what you actually believe, simply because you might get arrested or you might get a knock on the door.
I have to stop you here because we are up against the clock again. We're talking with Ted Newson. Where can people find you on social media?
People can find me on Twitter at NewsonTed, and I post my articles there regularly. Hope to see you.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. Hey, we're happy to welcome Aidan Grogan back to the program. Aidan, I know that you're getting to be kind of a regular guest on here, but for those who are meeting you for the first time, tell us what you do.
Yeah, I'm a history PhD candidate at Liberty University and the donor communications manager at the American Institute for Economic Research.
Very nice. And I'm looking at an article that you've written here that really grabbed my attention. The headline is "The Left Has a Baby Dilemma." But for those who are, well, they want children. No, actually the problem you explain is they don't want children, but immigrants alone can't support the entitlements that are being demanded. Help us connect all the dots here. When it comes to entitlements, why is it important that we have more people to come into the workforce and to work and generate income? What happens when we stop having kids?
Yeah, so the dilemma and the contradiction at the heart of the left's agenda presently is that they support big government programs like entitlements, such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, as well as public pensions, public education, climate initiatives, public infrastructure. All of these programs require a fairly large tax base to subsidize. And over the long term, that requires that we have more people who are working and paying taxes to keep this system afloat. But simultaneously, the left is committed to an increasingly anti-natal worldview that regards children as a burden to women and their careers, or even as a potential threat to the earth and the climate. So that's a fundamental contradiction, and the future of left-wing politics depends upon the left being able to articulate a more compelling case for motherhood.
I think an example that I've heard used to illustrate the problem is if you picture those who work as the ones pulling a wagon and those who are receiving the entitlements as the one riding in the wagon, the problem is there are fewer and fewer people left to pull the wagon each year. And it's not just this. I think this is happening in countries all around the world. But what are some of the reasons? I mean, you mentioned climate. You mentioned maybe they just look at motherhood as being oppressive. Are there any justifiable reasons for why children should be kept at arm's length, or that people, Gen Z in particular, shouldn't be having kids?
Well, a variety of reasons are put forth. Of course, many on the left believe that we're heading into a climate catastrophe in which it is unjust to bring children in the world and subject them to that. Of course, those claims are very apocalyptic, and even someone like Bill Gates has recently come out and said that we're not heading into that doomsday scenario and people can calm down a little bit. Others are very concerned about the state of the economy. Of course, Americans have dealt with inflation in recent years. The prices of housing have gone way up. Now, if you compare the present state of affairs, especially concerning the economy, to what people in previous generations or throughout all of human history have had to deal with, we're still living in times of superabundance. People are richer and better off, safer and more healthy than they've ever been in human history. So despite the cost of housing, despite inflation, despite the political divisions that are underway in American society, this is still objectively the best time in human history to have children. And that should be part of the narrative. People in the past, despite living in absolute squalor, did not think in such ways. Children were still regarded as a blessing, and it was just still commonly understood that you grow up, you get married, and you have kids. There wasn't really a question about it. It wasn't a question of pros and cons.
Yeah, I have 6 kids, and so I find they are probably the primary source of my happiness as well as my heartache in life, but I'll take that trade-off. But when it comes to taxpayers. Now it seems like it's less about someone's joy, and now it's more of a utilitarian thing. Who is going to be there to generate the taxes? Talk to me about AI and automation, and why even though these are taking over many jobs, why are they not alone enough to make it work?
Yeah, well, robots don't pay taxes, and that's the simple reason why that's not a long-term solution. So the left at present looks toward immigration as a possible solution, but birth rates are crashing everywhere, not just in the United States or other rich countries. So it's only a matter of time before the problems that are facing developed countries like the US or Japan, much more pressingly, also affect developing countries. So it's not as if there will always be an endless amount of immigrants to come in and offer support in the form of taxes for the various programs that the left cherishes.
When it comes to nations that have seen their child or their birth rate decline, I'm curious, which nations have the steepest decline in their birth rate?
South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world at just 0.7. So the average woman in South Korea is not even having a child. Most South Korean women are childless at this point. And Japan has a also very low fertility rate of about 1.0, but they've been experiencing sub-replacement fertility for half a century. So Japan has gone the furthest down the route toward an inverted population pyramid where you have more retirees than workers. So Japan is really an example of where the rest of the world is going vis-a-vis low fertility in the coming decades.
Let's flip that around now and ask, which nations are seeing the highest fertility rate?
Nations in sub-Saharan Africa currently have the highest fertility, but even there, the trend in the long term is a decrease in fertility. So while they still might be having 4, 5, even 6 kids per woman in that part of the world, the general trend is coming down. So by the end of the century, nearly all countries in the world are likely to experience below replacement fertility, according to a Lancet medical journal projection. So it's only a question of when and not if, absent some monumental change in the way that people go about family life around the world.
I'm still kind of thinking about your comment about how robots don't pay taxes. And yet there's a part of me, my brain just wants to try and figure, is there a way that with AI or with automation, that basically the footprint of government could be shrunk? Is that just a pipe dream?
I don't think we should be overly optimistic about the potential of AI. I think it's a useful tool for economic productivity and efficiency, but it's not a messiah. It's not going to save us from our various fiscal problems, which rely on people. As the economist Julian Simon said, the ultimate resource is people. So we always need to build a future for humans and not rely on machines.
And I believe you mentioned in your article too that there's a divide between Gen Z men and women in terms of how important children are. I know we're down to just about a minute or so here, but what's your best take on where does that divide come from?
Yeah, the NBC poll found that there's a huge contrast, in fact, a polar opposite take on how Gen Z men who voted for Trump and Gen Z women who voted for Harris view child rearing. Gen Z men who voted for Trump view it as the most important. Gen Z women who voted for Harris believe it's the least important. So it's really a difference in outlook. Young women who are on the left view careerism and consumerism as the most important, and young men who are on the right and voted for Trump view family and having kids as the most important. So that's a foundational difference in the basic outlook toward life that young men and young women, conservative and liberal, have.
Well, Aidan, I just want you to know, based on this conversation, I'm going to hug my kids today. You just made me grateful for them. Where can people find you on social media?
You can follow me on X at Aidan Grogan.
Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to our next conversation. Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. I'm happy to welcome a new contributor to the show. Her name is Cláudia Nunes, and she is joining us from Portugal today. Cláudia, welcome to the program. I'm so happy to meet you. Would you take just a moment to tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, sure. My name is Cláudia Nunes, as you perfectly said. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal. Currently, I'm a political writer. I'm focused on technology. I used to be very focused on European politics. I'm so sorry. And that's it. I was also developing my own app to try to help with the housing problem in Europe. It's step by step.
I'm looking at a wonderful article you've written for DC Journal. It's titled "Ending the Opioid Epidemic is Easier Than We Think." And this is a topic that's kind of near and dear to me. My dad was a pharmacist, and I learned a little bit about, opioid addiction, sadly, because he had surgeries, and even a pharmacist can become addicted, to painkillers. And as you point out in your article, the opioid crisis in America is something that the system actually seems to keep going, in that the system itself seems to push doctors and patients toward these addictive medications. And let's talk about, first of all, let's frame the problem of what that opioid epidemic looks like, and then let's talk about some of the solutions. So when we talk about a crisis regarding opioids, what does that look like? How do we define the crisis?
Okay, I was a bit shocked when I started to do this research, when I even hear that it was a problem. I was shocked because in 2022 alone, there was 81,000 deaths involving opioids. And I can tell you that 50,000 of those people were taking legal prescribed opioids. So it doesn't make very sense if these medicines are prescribed to help you, and in the end you have this huge number. This is, for me, it's a scandal. It's almost like the government is pushing their own citizens to a cliff. Maybe my expression is too strong, but it seems like the state is pushing people to death, and it's shocking, really.
Based on those numbers that you provided, though, that's an awful lot of people dying, and again, from legally prescribed drugs. You mentioned in the article that scientific innovation already offers safer alternatives. Let's talk about what are some of the alternatives that exist that people aren't being given access to at this point.
Yes, for what I found out, the FDA recently approved a non-opioid oral medication called Journavax. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Mm-hmm. And there is other very similar to it. And these drugs are safe, effective, and free of addictive risks. But at the moment, it's essential that the government, in their programs like Medicare and Medicaid, they need to update their rules to cover these new treatments and remove outdated restrictions, because at the moment, there is a very bizarre, in my point of view, rule that is, you first need to try a treatment with opioids, and only if you failed in that treatment, you can have another medication. Again, it's a little bit odd and dangerous that you need to fail on something so addictive first.
Yeah, it seems like and when they say fail, they mean the drug no longer works, or are they talking about failure in the form of addiction with the
To be honest,
opioids?
no, it's regarding to the effect that is supposed to make. So if it's not working on you as it should, it's considered a failure, and then you are they allow you to try another solution, but you need to fail first.
What makes it so difficult for regulators to change these outdated regulations? Why is it so hard to affect change there?
Well, what I saw, there's a lot of bureaucracy around it, and I think the Republican and Democratic Party they don't get along. So I think in the end, the public it's in the middle of this lack of decision. So it seems like there is no true will of the two biggest parties in making this process more quick, more effective. So it's again the red tape, the bureaucracy.
And I don't want to sound like I'm promoting a conspiracy, but do the drug companies that have existing prescription drugs out there on the market, I know that they spend an awful lot of money lobbying lawmakers in the U.S. Is some of the slowness in implementing these new non-opioid medications, does it come because the drug companies are slowing the process down or trying to convince regulators to make it hard for them to come onto the market?
To be honest with you, in my research, I didn't learn anything about it, but I think it's a hypothesis that we cannot exclude in this type of issues. There's a lot over the table to consider.
Now, I know from your article you mentioned that there are things that are being done, or at least have been brought forward to help correct this problem. For instance, you mentioned the No Pain Act. Tell me a little bit about the No Pain Act.
Okay, the No Pain Act was allegedly created to correct this precisely this issue that we are talking about, but until now, it seems that it's not working correctly. So in the end, what we need is that the No Pain Act starts to be implemented effectively. Doesn't make much sense that you have the Non-Pain Act since 2022 and it's not correctly being used. So it's a matter of you already have the law and you need to make it effective. That's the main problem. And again, red tape, bureaucracy, politicians, a lot in the middle. It's very concerning.
And I had no idea that the No Pain Act has actually been around for 3 years, and it's just taking that long to implement it. Talk to me about, you mentioned in your article that if you were just to replace 10 to 25% of opioid prescriptions with safer alternatives, that could still save many, many lives.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
So you mentioned in your article that even if you replace 10 to 25% of those addictive opioid prescriptions with safer alternatives that are non-addictive, it could still end up saving thousands of lives. We're down to about a minute here, but talk to me about how this could best be approached in terms of getting the wheels to turn so that the No Pain Act is actually accessible to doctors and patients.
Well, I think that you need to make it more. Let's see. In the end, this is also a market. We know that in USA, the health issues, they are all privatized. So it seems you need to have some incentives, practical incentives to start to implement this kind of solutions.
I have to stop you here because we're up against the clock again. We're talking with Cláudia Nunes. She is a policy analyst with Young Voices. Can people follow you on social media? Where might they find you?
Sure. They can find me on X, and my name on X is Cláudia Shandy, with an S and an H, and not an Y. Okay, it's an I. And on my Instagram, it's Cláudia Shandy, Liberty.
And we are back. It's our fourth and final segment today on Moving Forward with Young Voices. Happy to welcome Kyle Moran back to the program. Kyle, for those meeting you for the first time, let's take a moment and you can please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Kyle Moran. I'm a senior contributor over for Young Voices. I mostly write about foreign policy, tech, and recently, as tech has been encroaching more and more, monetary policy.
Well, I've got an article here of yours from Real Clear Politics, and it has to do with job creation. And, you know, as I looked at your article and as I think about it, the jobs numbers in the U.S. have been kind of a point of controversy for the last few years. Talk to me about what the Bureau of Labor Statistics shared earlier this year and the problem with some of the jobs numbers that were fed to us, particularly over the last, say, couple of years.
Yeah, so I've had two in Real Clear Politics recently on this subject. So the first one being back in early September, I believe, the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, essentially puts out an annual revision on top of their month after month revision to their jobs data. And typically there's going to be some revisions because it is an estimate survey that they continuously get more data coming in. So the initial ones are not guaranteed to be spot on by any stretch. The issue is that lately they have become worse and worse, and the revisions have grown more and more. So by the time the annual revision for 2024 through part of 2025 came in, it turned out that the BLS had hallucinated 1 million jobs that just did not exist. So, I mean, this is not some minor tweaking of, you know, a few extra jobs here, a few fewer there. This is the data that they're using is just simply bad. And real economic decisions are being made based on this data that is telling very inaccurate stories.
Yeah, I'm with you when you say this is a lot more than just a rounding error. Those are huge numbers. My question for you, Kyle, is so who gave the bad numbers and how would it benefit them to hallucinate nearly 1 million jobs?
Yeah, so Trump has been pushing that this has been more of a political thing. I don't believe that, to be honest. I think that the Fed is just bad at this because never ascribe to malice what you can ascribe to variously either stupidity or incompetence. In this case, I'm going to say incompetence rather than stupidity, because the way that they do this is the system was designed decades and decades ago, if not close to a century at this point, where they send out surveys that are completely optional to companies. It's very much structured in like a salary-based W-2 centric economy in which everyone has one employer who's relatively centralized and can feed all this data back to the Federal Reserve. And as the gig economy has really sprouted up, this has really kind of upended how they collect data. And they haven't revised their data collection processes at all. So you're getting all of this very bad data, and they're trying to use what little they are getting to extrapolate the entire economy. And well, lo and behold, that doesn't work too well.
Wow. I'm wondering too, as we look at the jobs numbers, off in my peripheral vision, I seem to see AI getting closer and closer, and I'm hearing a lot of people talk, some with kind of a doom take, and others with a more optimistic take that AI is coming, it's not going to be stopped, and it's going to be at least as dramatic in changing our world as the internet has been.
Oh, absolutely. It is coming. And that's my second article was really talking about this. So the Fed is operating off of 20th century monetary policy, in which it imagines that as the economy softens, they will cut rates. As rates go down, companies will have more money to spend. Therefore, they will be able to expand easier, which will necessitate creating more jobs, in theory, because they're expanding. And thus you'll be able to boost employment and so on. The issue is that the link between expanding companies and job creation has been severed, in my opinion, permanently by the rise of artificial intelligence. And we're still in the early stages of this. But some of the biggest companies that are doing quite well, Microsoft is not doing poorly. Okay, it's not that they're struggling and have to cut jobs because they can't afford these people. They're cutting them because they're redundant. And this is, on some level, something that we just have to understand will happen, because when you're dealing with companies, these are not charities. They don't need to be expected to provide jobs to the entire society simply because we need them. The companies will act in what they perceive to be their best interest, which as we automate more and more will simply mean fewer and fewer jobs. So now we're in a situation where Fed rate cuts will allow them to borrow cheap and be able to expand. And per the Wall Street Journal's own reporting, many of these companies are expanding without creating new jobs because they don't need to. And so far right now, for a lot of 2025, what we've seen is kind of a no fire, no hire situation where people who, they're not really getting rid of people, but they're just not taking on new ones. We're starting to see even that slowly erode to the point where companies are just cutting jobs in specific sectors now, but this will continue. And I mean, the CEOs are openly telling us that this is coming. The CEO of Ford, or one executive of Ford, was discussing how this will replace half of the white-collar force at the company. And the CEOs of major AI companies are also openly discussing. I mean, this is going to be massive levels of job eliminations, while not really creating a whole heck of a lot of new jobs themselves. So it's something that we need to be discussing in society.
So I have to ask, who is going to be hit hardest by this? My mind immediately goes to, the people who are finishing college or just getting ready to enter into the workplace. It seems like that just got a lot tougher because there are a lot of jobs that they're just not needed for.
Yeah, exactly. So the fresh college graduates are going to definitely be hit the hardest right now because it's sort of replacing the more entry-level stuff. But this is going to continue to expand. And again, this is what I always harken back to. This is the worst that AI will ever be again. So there are a lot of people out there who say, okay, well, yes, it can do some things now, but I mean, surely it can't do all of these other things. Well, you're right, it can't today, and it won't tomorrow. But if you look at what ChatGPT was like when it first released in the end of 2022, I mean, it was kind of crap. It was just giving you nonsense. And a lot of times it didn't make any sense. And by even looking back just 1 year, it has improved dramatically. And this is going to continue to accelerate.
No, I totally get what you're saying about AI. I'm barely dipping my toes into the pool and learning to use it, but it's a necessity. And it seems like the updated version, what's the latest, greatest, leading edge AI? It doesn't just change over, years. Well, last year it was this and this year. It's like weekly you have to keep tabs on, okay, who just took the next big leap?
Yeah, it's a constant development circle at this point. So we will see.
So the Fed, can't fix this, and we're down to less than a minute here. But is there a solution at hand? Is there a way that we can embrace AI and automation, and still people can be gainfully employed or able to provide for themselves?
So I'll close here with Pope Leo himself. When he was elected earlier this year, he chose the name Leo off of the past Leo the 13th, who was Pope during the Industrial Revolution. And he said that he chose that name because he believes artificial intelligence will be as tumultuous of a process for society as the Industrial Revolution was. So that's what I'm going to say on that.
Very interesting. Again, we're talking with Kyle Moran. He's a political commentator and contributor for Young Voices. Kyle, where can people follow you on social media?
Sure. So I am on X at Kyle P. Moran, and you can check out my portfolio at Join Young Voices website.
Thanks again for your time. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.